as Deb said, I'm Angela Jimenez. I was born in New York, raised in Madison. I went through MMSD from 2006 to 2019. I went to Muir, then I went to Jefferson, which is now Gillespie. Then I went to Memorial, which is where I graduated from. Then I went to UW. Practicums were at Hawthorne, and why am I blanking? Oh, Hawthorne, Toki, then Lincoln, and now I'm Lincoln through and through. So yeah, thanks. And then this is my presentation of teaching and learning. So I went through the program at UW-Madison, and with that program we are required at the end of our student teaching, program to make a presentation of how we've grown as a person throughout our 2 years in the program. And so I made mine about how I went through MMSD with my time in MMSD with and without this ELL label, and how that impacted me and my family just as I was going through this education system. So just for the purposes of the presentation and kind of how I grew up with the label, I use the term ESL because that's what it was referred to when I was going through MMSD, but I know that over time it has transferred over to ELL, and I went through all the coursework at UW, so I know that part, but for just the presentation I said ESL. And like I said, this is just kind of how I went through it as a student in my lens, and just how me and my family went through it. So this is me growing up. So this is kind of when I was like 3 or 4, I want to say. Like I said, I grew up in a Spanish-speaking household. I was the oldest of 4, so there's me, and then I have a sister who is currently a junior at UW, a brother who is still trying to figure it out, and then a sister who is currently at Gillespie, 7th grade. And then, and then like I said, I went to school here in Madison, and then as being the oldest, I was the one who was always translating the stuff for my parents. I was the one who read all the important paperwork. Don't know how I did all that, honestly. But yeah, so that's what I did. So now I'm just going to go a little bit into what it was like being a student through MMSD with the ELL label and without it. So K through 5, in kindergarten, I remember I had gotten enrolled into Muir, but I don't ever remember having any form of support. I remember being kind of just taken to kindergarten and being like, this is your teacher. This is who you are going to go to for a whole school year. Good luck. There was never really anyone there really to help me out other than for parent-teacher conferences, because obviously my parents needed some form of interpretation for stuff like that, which then made me very frustrated with everything because I never really 100% understood about everything that was going on. And so because of it, one of the things I remember about it in kindergarten, especially like the one moment I remember being really frustrated and scared, was that in kindergarten, because I had no supports there to tell me, hey, like this is what the teacher's telling you to do. In kindergarten, after recess, we had something called quiet time. We didn't exactly have a nap time, unfortunately, but we did have quiet time. And so after recess, we would go and find these like green dots, which were basically the toys that were quiet. And I remember coming in from recess and being like, okay, I'm gonna go play, everyone's playing with toys, let me go play with the toy kitchen that's in the back of the room. And my teacher getting visibly annoyed, but I didn't understand why. And so I was like, kind of weirded out when she came over and said like, hey, you have to go play over there. And I was like, why can't I play with the kitchen? Everyone else is playing with toys. So after she took me away, I was like, okay, I'm gonna go back to what I was doing. So I went back and started playing with the toy kitchen again. And she just got really annoyed and frustrated, which, I mean, like, I get it, I was frustrated, so I can only imagine she was frustrated. But within that frustration, she ended up just kind of like pulling me around saying like, this is what you can do and this is what you can't, and she was visibly frustrated. And there was just a lot of like, in a very like, to me it looked like in an aggressive way where it was like, I don't know why you're mad at me for, like I don't get it. And so at that point I was just kind of scared and kind of just like, why is this happening to me? So that was just kind of one of the things that kind of made me realize like, oh, I don't understand anything. Obviously, as the years went on, it got easier. After kindergarten, I started understanding, because like I said, I didn't know any English because I grew up in a Spanish-speaking household. So the only English I really knew were the ones from PBS Kids, from watching like Martha Speaks or Super Y or Dragon Tales, or like Nick Jr. when I was watching like Backyardigans and stuff like that. Like that's the only English I ever had picked up. So that's all the English I had to get me by. But as the years went on, I got better, and I got a little too good at it because by the time I got to 2nd and 3rd grade, I was the interpreter kid for other kids that came from a new country. So in 2nd and 3rd grade, I had a classmate who had just arrived from a Spanish-speaking country. I can't remember which one, but he spoke Spanish, and his assigned seat was right next to mine. I was like, oh, cool, like I get to sit next to the new kid. Well, my teacher then came up to me and was like, oh, like you should be a really good friend and you should help them, like, you know, adjust to the class. And I was like, oh, you mean like kind of show them around and stuff. And so that's what I thought in my head. No, it turned out that I had to interpret everything that was going on that week or that day. So I just sat there, and not only was I doing my work, I was essentially doing his work, which to me as an 8 or 9-year-old was not a fun experience. I remember being really frustrated and feeling like, why do I have to do this at home and at school? Because like I said, I already interpret stuff at home. So it's like now I'm at school and I'm expected to A, be a student, B, to learn, and C, I'm also expected to interpret things for this kid who I don't even know, which then kind of caused me to not like the kid. But like, obviously it's not his fault. It's just I was expected to interpret for him, and he obviously was just as frustrated as I was back in kindergarten. But eventually he did kind of get supports, but like when our BRS or BRT wasn't there, I was the one 90% interpreting, which was kind of annoying. But all in all, like, it wasn't bad. I genuinely liked it. 4th, 5th grade was great. All my other teachers were amazing, and everything was fine. It was just, there were certain things here and there where it was just, I was starting to pick up the signs of, okay, you're bilingual. What does that mean? And so growing up through K through 5, that's kind of what I realized, and that's kind of the mentality I had of like, you're bilingual, so you should be helping interpret for everyone, everything. And there was just a lot of assumptions, like I said. And then come middle school, so in 6th grade, like I said, I was first generation for everything, oldest. Going to 6th grade was the hardest transition of my life. I didn't realize that elementary was not the same as middle school. I didn't realize that middle school was a whole other ballpark. And so because of it, I struggled a lot, especially in math and science, just because, first of all, science is not my strong suit at all. Math, I can easily like kind of figure out and navigate, but science is just not my thing. So when I got to 6th grade, it was just a lot of constant battles of, what are we doing? I don't get it, and asking for help. And even when I did ask for help, I was still like, I would be like, oh yeah, I got it. And then she'd walk away and be like, I still don't know what's going on. So it was just the constant battles of, I don't know what's going on. And so in middle school, which I'm sure all of you know, is you have the framework of like fall conferences are meant for everyone to come in, meet their teachers, get to know how their kid's doing. Spring conferences are more like, oh, like this is how we would like to further support your student in order to make sure they're getting to where they need to be. So come spring conferences, I was told, oh yeah, you need a spring conference with mom and dad, and I said, okay, great. So they came in, and first conference was just like, oh, you know, Angela's struggling with math and science and everything else in between. But by spring conferences, it was more of a conversation of, well, she's still not talking in class, she's not really like asking the questions that she needs to ask, and she's not doing X, Y, and Z, so we think it's best if we give her an ESL label. So at that point, they described it to my parents. From what I can remember, from what my mom remembers, is they were describing it to her as, oh, this will provide her the support she needs, and like extra, for example, like tutoring and stuff like that will help her kind of further understand the material. And so my mom, thinking that it was a good thing, and me thinking it was also a good thing, we all signed the form and said, all right, fine, she can have the ESL label. So I get signed into ESL. 7th grade is the first year, full year I have it. Academically, I'm doing a lot better, so I will say there's that. And I also joined AVID, so there was that too. And I think that genuinely helped also, just because I know AVID's framework also really helped me grow as a student. And then that's kind of what happened. And then when that was the first year I took the Access test, which also, I hated that test, but I will say the perk was that the teachers always gave you candy and snacks, so that was a huge perk. Same when, I don't think we still do it, I don't even think we do it anymore, but when I was in 6th grade, we did the WKCE testing also, and I remember during WKCE, that was another perk. We got pulled to another room, and we got this whole like middle table of just snacks and candy that we could just get up at any point and grab. So that was a perk. But I will say the Access test was not the best part of my academic schooling. And so I didn't pass 7th grade, the Access test, but then come 8th grade, I was told, hey, you're doing really great, and we want to nominate you for the Sanchez Award, which is granted by Centro Hispano. And so I applied, I interviewed, and not long after that I get a phone call saying, hey, just wanted to let you know your daughter has been selected as a finalist and has been awarded the Sanchez Award. And then, but prior to finding that out, I was pulled into this like conference room meeting with some representatives of ITA, which if, for some of you that don't know, is a branch off of People Program. So there's the overall arching People Program scholarship program, but off of that branch there's a branch called ITA, which is Information Technology Academy, which is kind of like a technology-based pre-college program. And upon completion, if you get into UW, they cover 4 years worth of tuition. And so I was like, well, obviously I want to do that too. So I applied for it and I also got in. And so I was like, oh cool, like I get to go to UW for free and I get a whole other Sanchez Award. Unfortunately, I was told to pick between the two. Obviously I picked the scholarship, but I was told I had to pick between the two. And I was like, okay, great, like I'm set. I'm in ITA, I'm going to go to high school, then I'm going to go to college, it's great. And then my amazing ESL teacher pulls me aside, is like, hey Angel, like I'm really proud of you, I'm glad you got in. But there's a catch. And I was like, what's up? She's like, well, I'm really proud of you, but in order for you to take the classes you're required to take in high school that can help you get to UW, you need to lose the ESL label. And I was like, well, how do I do that? Well, you have to test out of the Access exam. Mind you, I'm in 8th grade. I have one last chance to take it before I can go to high school. And then on top of that, if I don't lose the label soon, by the time I get to high school, my classes are not going to transfer over to UW. Because once you have an ESL label, you're kind of taking different classes to kind of help assist you, because it's under the impression that you need the assistance. And so my ESL teacher was really pushing for like, hey, you have to drop the label or you can't really go. And so I remember I was testing, and I was like, well, we're going to hope for the best. We're really going to try really hard and see what happens. I remember taking the exam at 8th grade completion ceremony. My ESL teacher pulls me up to the front on the stage and says, hey, we're awarding her the Sanchez Award, everything like that. And then right as I'm getting on stage, it's like, by the way, you passed your Access exam. You are now officially EL label free. And I was like, great. So I had a very short time with the label, but just knowing that I had the label to get to anything past 8th grade was a little stressful, but I got it off. I tested out, and so then when I got to high school, my freshman, sophomore year was a lot easier transition than middle school. I was still an avid. I struggled a little bit in math, but I got better, and I started at ITA. And then when I got to junior, senior year, because I had the freedom of taking any classes I wanted, I was able to take AP classes. I was able to apply to all the colleges I wanted to, because I was an avid, so they also helped me apply to colleges. I was in ITA, which helped me apply to UW, and all these things. And then because of these opportunities, I got internships. So at ITA, I got a technology-based internship. So I was an intern the summer before my junior year at WSUM, which is the student radio station at UW. And then the summer before my senior year, I was an intern at American Girl working supply chain. And that same year, I was apparently too good at it, because they thought I was going to take a whole summer to work on an Excel spreadsheet. Only took me 2 days. So they were like, yeah, we need to find this girl something else to do. So I got hired in HR. So I worked HR for them most of my senior year. And so that's what I did. And then, like I said, I had internships. I graduated with honors, and I played soccer, if you couldn't tell by my amazing farmer's hand in the picture. But yeah, so that's kind of what the ESL label did for me. But like I said, I made it to college. So in general, how this affected me is that my classmates would always hear Spanish when we were walking in the hallway, especially in elementary school. And they would just stop me and say, hey, what did they say? And I was like, what do you mean? They're like, well, they're talking in Spanish and you know what they're saying, so what are they saying? And I would be like, well, I'm not 100% sure because I don't listen to random Spanish conversations. So they were kind of thrown off by that. I would also be taken out of, it was automatically assumed that I didn't know the content with the label, so I could be sitting in math class and I would finally understand what was going on. But even then, I was still told, like, hey, you have to come with us, you're doing your work with so group. And I would say, but I want to stay here with my friends, like I understand what's going on. Yeah, no, you still have to come with us. So I would lose a lot of my my friends' time basically, or work time with my classmates to get pulled out to go work with another group of students who obviously I 100% agree needed the support, whereas like I was taking that time away also, or I felt like I was taking that time away also because I didn't feel like I needed the assistance, but I was still required to have it. Since I had the label, I was still required to be pulled out. So I was required to be taken with them. It was also assumed that I took Spanish in high school because it was easy, which, let me just say, Spanish in Spain is not the same as Spanish in Mexico. So Spanish in high school is definitely not easier. I don't know like os, vos, and stuff like that. So it was just kind of harder to do the conjugations for that. So I wouldn't say it was an easy A. And then I was, like I said, I was constantly used growing up as the classroom interpreter for students when they didn't have an interpreter with them. I was just assumed the automatic interpreter for them. And then honestly, just me not knowing the language in general makes me feel kind of dumb not knowing certain words. So me and my coworker sometimes makes fun of it because my co-teacher sometimes he tries to use this new big vocabulary, and 90% of the time I don't know what any of the words mean. And sometimes other times, like when I was in like high school writing essays, or I was in college writing essays, it was just like, oh, use this word. I'm like, what does that word mean? Like, you don't know what that word means? I'm like, no, I don't. What does that mean? Like, enlighten me. What is it? So it was just stuff like that it's like I grew up, like I'm really glad I know 2 languages, but it's not 100% going to mean I know either language really well, or I know all these big words. So it was just, I don't know. I just feel really dumb for it. I know I'm not, but that's just kind of what it felt like. And so now when I get to college, it kind of affected me in a way where it was like I felt like I didn't belong. I felt like I didn't belong there because I didn't earn my spot. I felt like I more so earned my spot by looking and acting a certain way, where it was like, oh, if we put her on a pamphlet, she'll make our school look diverse. Or, oh, she is bilingual, that's great. She can, she can give us a great representation when we hand out our demographic to people. And so it just always felt like I was accepted based on my demographic self, my ethnicity, the language I speak, where I grew up, my race, and everything along those lines, but never because of my academics. So compared to for example, my white counterpart, or it was like my other white classmates were like, oh, I went and took 3 AP classes, got 5s on all of them. I graduated with a 4.05 GPA. I went and did this, whereas like I didn't graduate with a 4.0. I took a lot of APs. Did I 100% pass them? No, I still took the tests though. And I still did X, Y, and Z, but apparently I just never felt like that was enough. I felt like it was more so, oh, she's a student of color, therefore she's gonna make our university look great. So it just took a lot out of me my freshman year, and then especially when there's a very small amount of people on your campus that just look like you. So it was just a lot to overcome. And COVID didn't make it any easier, but once COVID was over and I kind of started finding my group of people, I started finding my way out of it. I joined a multicultural Greek council sorority. So on campus you have like your Langdon sororities, but then you also have your multicultural sororities, which is kind of where I found people that look more like me, and I felt more connected with them, and I felt like I found a group of people. So I hung out more with them, and I found a lot of great connections through them, whether they weren't in the sorority. And then once I got to the School of Education and I got placed in the cohort, I found a group of people who whether or not they looked like me, at least I knew that in terms of education, we all went through the same feeling, and just like how we all talked about education was very similar, and I just found people who I could surround myself with. And so because of it, I kind of got myself out of it, and then just finding people to talk to is also really great. And so this is me at graduation. Like I said, I overcame it. I graduated from UW. And so that was me. I had 13 cords or something like that. I don't know. I had so much wearing that day. It was a lot. But it was just a lot of that. And so now, as an educator, in the classroom, when I first made this presentation, this is what I had wanted to do. And then my last slide is what I actually got to do now that I'm a teacher. So in the classroom, I know that just because my students speak the language that maybe I don't know doesn't automatically make them the interpreter. So I'm lucky enough where luckily all my kids either speak English or Spanish or a combination of both. So I know how to help them, but if I'm ever not in that situation, I'm not just going to assume that one of my students, just because they know the language, is automatically going to be my interpreter. Because I know firsthand that that's not the way that it works, and I also know that firsthand that it's not 100% great, and I know it's annoying. And then I also know that them not understanding the work when they understand everything else isn't necessarily a language barrier. So like, for example, my kids could be really good at math and writing, but maybe reading and science is just not their thing, and that doesn't automatically mean that it's a language barrier. I have a lot of kids like that. Like, I have bilingual kids in my class who, yeah, they are really great at reading, but like their writing, like their spelling is not up there, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a language barrier. Sometimes it is just, we're still working on it. And then just me not understanding a language is not something I should be frustrated at them for. It's just more so something I can be frustrated, but I'm not frustrated at them. And that's just the constant thing that I think sometimes, like even I forget sometimes, where it's like I'll try to teach Spanish literacy and it's like, okay, like these kids are not getting it, like why aren't we getting it? And it's like, I'm not frustrated with them, I'm just frustrated with the fact that maybe I should be changing what I'm saying, or I should be changing how I'm teaching it. And so just constantly remembering, like, you shouldn't be frustrated with them, be frustrated with the fact of how maybe things aren't going the way you wanted it to. Maybe your lessons didn't go the way you thought it would, and stuff like that. And then lastly, just understanding that the limitation that a label can put on a student. Like I said, like if I hadn't gotten rid of that label in 8th grade, I probably wouldn't have gone to where I am today, and stuff like that. And then within my community, just understanding that in my community there is a diverse community and that I should try to learn more about it. For example, I work at Lincoln, so my Lincoln community is quite diverse. And then just learning the limitations that are put in place, because obviously I should be aware of those and I should know how I want to further learn more about them and how to help my students. And then just knowing that my communities are constantly fighting for their rights and to make their place in this community. So yes, Lincoln community is really diverse and a lot of them have their places, but there's probably a couple people there who are still trying to fight to find their place within the community or make their own way within the community. And then just knowing that there are unfair limitations put in place for my students. Some of my new kids are newcomers, and for them that's not their choice. It's not their choice that they're here. It's not their choice that they're struggling. And just understanding that, yeah, those limitations are there, but what am I going to do about it to help them overcome them? What am I going to do? What part of their story am I playing that's going to help them grow as learners? And so that's just kind of what I've learned. And then now as a DLI teacher, so this is my lovely class with me and my co-teacher. And as a DLI teacher, I have decided to provide the support that I didn't have. So like I said, I have 6 or 7 newcomers in my room right now. And with that, I'm just providing them with the supports that I didn't have growing up. And then advocating for them. They don't know any English, so they don't 100% know how to tell someone like, hey, this is really bothering me, or hey, this happened at recess, or I don't feel safe, or I don't feel like this. So it's like just giving them someone to talk to and just knowing that their voices are heard, whether it's in English or Spanish. And then creating an environment where they feel welcome, acknowledging and reminding all my students that they're all ELLs, because even my kiddos that grow up speaking English at home, their English is still developing. So they're all technically ELLs. There's not just, oh, my kids who are newcomers or speak Spanish at home are my only ELLs. They're all ELLs. And then lastly, just me being the person that they can look up to, especially my newcomers. Growing up, I didn't have any teachers that looked like me or spoke like me. So me officially being the person that they look up to, being the person that they just kind of see every day and is like, oh, she speaks Spanish, she went to college, she did all these amazing things, why can't I do it? So now I'm the person that they look up to. And yeah, so one last thing is that something that like highlights that little part is that at the beginning of the school year, I had a newcomer from Venezuela. She started the school year around 2 weeks she started the school year with us, but 2 weeks into it, her parents decided to move her to Florida. It was a very last minute move, so she ended up leaving. She moved to Florida. And honestly, like, it's Florida, so I kind of thought about her a lot, just kind of like, how is she doing? What is she, like, is she learning what she needs to learn? Is she developing? This girl had not been through any education. She had not, she didn't go to school in Venezuela. She didn't have anything, really. So I was like, when I was like setting stuff up for the classroom, and just knowing that I was like, well, how am I going to help her? But now knowing that I wasn't the one helping her just kind of made me a little uncomfortable, where it's like, oh, I really hope she's learning. And then the week before Thanksgiving, I get an email from our school secretary saying, hey, the student's being re-added to your school roster. And it was her again. She moved back from Florida. And she rejoined my class roster, she rejoined my classroom. And I remember her coming in and she was just smiling and just came up and was like, Maestra, and she ran and hugged me. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, how was Florida? Did you love the beach? Like, how was it? And she was like, well, I really love the warm weather. Better than Wisconsin. I was like, okay, fair, it's cold in Wisconsin, got it. But she was like, no, Maestra, like, they were really mean, like, I really missed you, because no one looked like me. She was like, no one understood me, no one talked to me. And so that's when I kind of realized, like, oh, I am completing that mission that I wanted, where it's like, I am the one they're looking up to. And that's kind of when I realized, like, oh, all the hard work I put in did finally culminate to my final message. But yeah, that's my presentation.